What's going on, Cane fans? Welcome to the Canecast, brought to you by the Grueling Truth Sports Network, also in works with Overtime Media and Big Heads Podcast Network, some companies we recently joined up with. So we're going to start working with those guys. As always, your host, Kyle Hinote, co-host Kevin Smith. What's going on, Kevin?
Going on, Kyle? We're celebrating a 1-0 week.
Finally, a 1-0 week. Oh, moral victories. So we played Bethune-Cookman this week. We're not going to really linger on that too long. What we're going to do today, guys, we have a little bit of a different lineup. We'll mention briefly the Bethune-Cookman game. We took a vacation.
So kind of going into this game, it's another game to work on things, to get yourself ready to go into Virginia Tech on October 5th. It's one of those things where I'd rather have, we don't need to blow them out for me like how we did Bethune. I'd rather us work on things we need to work on, like Jaron Williams throwing more deep balls, getting more comfortable throwing the ball down the field, just working on things we need to improve on, versus really just trying to go out there and just run dives and, just hammer them up front and do the things you can do against lesser opponents. I'd rather us focus on things we need to improve on so we can get ready to play Virginia Tech, Virginia, the Georgia Techs, Pitt, get ready to play those games. But as a game as a whole, I'm not worried at all. Should be another breeze. Something that Canes fans, I'm sure, are very excited for, because after the first 2 weeks, we could use a couple easy games to just kind of sit back and enjoy. But yeah, that's pretty much my little spiel in Central Michigan.
Yeah, it's definitely a game I don't think any fans are really worried about. I don't think Miami's in a position like Tennessee, where, or Virginia Tech last year, where they're kind of in the dumps. Not saying Miami's not in a place they don't want to be right now. We are, but not in a place where we're so in need of talent and depth and inexperience that this is a game that could trip us up. I don't think that's going to be a situation. So not a game really to break down a lot. I don't have a lot of respect for Jim McElwain in offense. We saw what he did at UF. I think
though how far these coaches fall, like it's great. Like,
well, it is strange. It is strange his time at Colorado, and then or was it Colorado State, and then had a fairly a good offense. That's why he was hired, to complement the defense that was in place by Muschamp, and just didn't really make sense. And when I watched it at Florida, it was a very strange offense. Never really ever sent more than 1, 2, max 3 receivers down the field at a time. Really, it was really kind of strange, and I don't think it's been carrying over well so far at Central Michigan. Also, this is the place that Dan Enos was a head coach at, and I think Dan Enos is the kind of guy that looks for reasons to take things personal. He said himself in a quote that he put his heart and soul into the program, and the administration, the president, did not. That's why he left to take the OC job at Arkansas. So I think that this is a time for Dan Enos to really kind of get a little payback. But kind of like you said, what I want to see is Miami work on Miami. I want to see them run the plays that they struggle with the most. I want to see them, run directly up the middle, not have to bounce it outside. I want to see the offensive line make some holes. I want to see some deep passes. And not rely too much on trickeration. Just run the simplistic basis of your offense. Continue to rep that and use this game as practice before we roll into the bye week and then Virginia Tech. So that's really, like I said, we took a vacation on Bethune-Cookman because there's really nothing to talk about. Nothing really to talk about Central Michigan. And so we'll just kind of leave it at that. Sorry, guys, if you want an in-depth analysis on Central Michigan. Not really going to give it to you.
Analysis of Central Michigan, this is not your pod, and I'm pretty sure I already listened to the Storm Surge this morning as well, and they didn't talk much about it either. There's just not much to talk about. But I guess I could just kind of turn it over to you and ask you, what were some of your good takeaways for the Bethune game? And what were something that you think that, kind of was negative in your eyes, if there was any? I don't know if there's anything you can kind of.
Well, in a game like Bethune-Cookman, I don't like to really get excited about anything. Usually what I do with these kind of games is I nitpick. Like, I only find things we did wrong, because anything you did good, you should do good. So anything you did wrong, it's like, that's kind of what I usually stay on. But I will say, on a positive note, I believe we played Bethune-Cookman. I'm not sure if we played Bethune-Cookman when Randy Shannon was in town. I know we did with Rick. I know we did with Golden. Um, Possibly Randy, but I don't quite remember. I don't want to lie because I've done no research on this. But, you know, in both situations, Bethune was always a team that at least a couple drives in the game had offensive success, was able to move the ball, and every game scored some kind of points, whether it was 3, whether it was 10. Um, I believe in 2017, we opened up with Bethune, and they marched the ball down on us 2 or 3 times in the beginning before we really pulled away.
Yeah, Manny hit
And
on me the other day about how
yeah,
2007 happy
so
about.
and then in a year where this is probably so far the worst defense we've had under Manny Diaz, so would be his 4th year at Miami. Being this probably tied with his first year on just a lot of deficiencies on the defense. With that being the case, I think that it was somewhat impressive for them to have. I think it was 9 or 10 3-and-outs, or 11 3-and-outs. Like, it was quite a
Only
bit.
first downs, I believe, the whole game.
Yeah, so to play a team and not even allow, because it's one thing if you take the ball, you get 1, 2, 3 first downs and you punt, even if you shut them out. But if they move the ball and get a couple first downs each time, you're still gonna be proud of your team. You're still glad you won. But to just completely just 3-and-out, 3-and-out, 3-and-out the entire game, that was impressive. It was a little encouraging, especially again, like I said, some areas on defense where we are young and lacking. So that was encouraging. And then I don't think we've ever really exceeded 40, 50 points every time we play them. So scoring 63 and putting in so many backups so early, I think that was kind of encouraging. That's kind of my takeaway. What do you think?
Yeah, so I'll start with something that I'll nitpick about and something that I actually do think is a problem. Um, Nothing crazy. It's just it's something that I'm tired of seeing, and the Canes teams have been kind of doing this for the last couple of years, starting slow. They started slow again. I believe at the end of the first quarter it was 7-0. Even going in, I think towards like 10 minutes in the second quarter, it was like still 7-0. And then they turned it on late in the second quarter, and it was halftime at 28-0. I think the score was a little bit deceiving, especially at halftime, because it did take us a while to kind of get our footing. I think we had a stop. They stopped us on a 4th and 1 where they just blew us up. I know Daninos took credit for that one, though. He took the blame. He said it was a poor scheme. But still, it's a little nerve-wracking to know that you still just can't run it down the middle against a Bethune-Cookman front. You should be able to do whatever you want. But other than that, nothing really else to nitpick. But the things I like to see is, again, Jaron Williams just throwing dimes out there. Like, he had a couple throws, and I know Roman from the OVB and Canes Insight put out a couple of videos. He had a couple that were just clear NFL caliber throws, like threading a needle 20 yards down the field. The guy just continues to improve. He continues to just get more and more comfortable out there. And then he threw a couple deep balls. There was one that was underthrown to Mark Pope. But it's nice to know that they are working on that. Like I said, that's what I want to see against Central Michigan. I want to see more deep balls, because when it comes to Virginia Tech and the ACC slate, we're not just going to be able to dink and dunk teams. We're going to need to take shots. And the last thing, too, that I like to see is it was nice to see Mark Pope look like a 5-star receiver. It sucked that he got hurt, but there were some of those catches and some of those moves and that speed that you had heard about for the last year and a half about Mark Pope. And it was finally nice to see him unleash some of that speed and to see him do what everyone's been talking about for the last year and a half. So there was definitely a lot of positives. Like you said, it's Bethune-Cookman, move on and just kind of try to improve on it. But Aaron Williams is just improving, and he's just impressing me as every game goes along.
So we'll kind of transition from there, and let's talk about, like I said, we'll talk about the state of the U, where we're at 3 games into the season. I believe almost a month into the season as a whole, but 3 games under our belt. And just kind of go position by position quickly, and kind of give our thoughts. So let's start with the offense. And you mentioned, and we'll start with receivers. You mentioned Mark Pope. I'm going to be honest. I'm less and less enthusiastic about the wide receiver core as the season goes on. Because here's the thing. This is how, in my opinion,
You
star
don't think
rankings.
you don't think KJ Osborne is a future NFL receiver?
No, I
If
don't. I don't think KJ Osborne's a future NFL receiver. He's not very big. He's not very fast. What he is a hard working guy. Can he go to the NFL and succeed? Would I have thought Julian Edelman would be an NFL wide receiver? Absolutely not. He was a quarterback in college at some no-name college. So could he be? Sure, I could be 100% wrong. But do I think he's going to be this guy that like a lot of teams are vying for and he's going to be this NFL guy? No. I think the only way he'll make the NFL roster and be any good is just through sheer dedication and hard work, and his talent isn't really going to get him there. I don't think he's a super talented guy. There's a reason he was a 2-star coming out of school, and it speaks volumes that he's one of our better – and I'm a huge fan of him at Miami. I'm so glad we got him. But it speaks volumes that he's one of probably our most reliable receiver after we've had some pretty good recruiting classes with receivers.
I thought the receivers actually kind of impressed me a little bit on Saturday. I know it's Bethune, but the
Well,
speed,
that's the
the
problem. Well, the speed looks good because it's Bethune. Like that, and here's the thing. I love KJ at Miami. I think he's one of the better receivers. I think he's dependable. I think we need him to win. But in hindsight, if we're being honest, he's not an elite caliber receiver. He's not going to blow any away with his agility, his speed, or his height. He's just going to work hard. He's going to make some tough catches, be dependable for you on third down, things like that, which is good. But where Miami's receiving core needs to be, if we were in the place we needed to be, KJ would be a backup receiver, that's just dependable. He would be kind of what Mike Harley's been for a little bit, then transition to Mike Harley. Again, he just got his first receiving touchdown in his junior year, and it was Bethune-Cookman. So people being high on Mike Harley, he's not really a dynamic receiver. He's pretty fast. He's sure-handed. I love to have him at Miami, but he's a backup, and he's starting for us. And so that's kind of an issue. Jeff Thomas definitely has the NFL speed to be a great receiver. To be seen if he's got the work ethic. He still has, and we've blamed the first 2 seasons on play calling and then quarterback play, and I'll give him that.
as Jaron gets more comfortable, I think we'll see Jeff Thomas.
I think we can. I think Jeff's got the most potential on the team. But then outside of Jeff Thomas, KJ Osborne, let's roll into where Miami should be and where they are. So let's go all the way back. Who was the receiver Mark Richt kicked off right off the bat? 4-star, was recruited under Golden.
Dante Mullins.
No, before him. It was Sam
Bruce.
Sam Bruce. So you have 4-star receiver Sam Bruce, looked pretty dynamic, never played in a game, so we can't say for sure. But it was a very highly touted receiver coming out of high school, gets kicked off the team with Mark Richt. Deontay Mullins, 4-star Under Armour All-American, wasn't really learning the playbook, transfers. Amon Richards breaks Michael Irvin's record, was a very good recruit and a great job with Mark Richt and that staff in evaluating him. Potential first-round draft pick, gets medically retired. We recruit Lawrence Cager, not really an impressive receiver in my sight. Another solid backup, what he should be, and yet he was starting for us. Now he's transferred. So now you bring in a transfer in KJ Osborne. Jeff Thomas has given you issues. We're still waiting on him to explode, and he's already in his junior year. And then we go into our highly coveted 2018 receiving core, in which it entails 1 5-star, 2 4-stars, and a pretty big and impressive 3-star. So what have we got?
That's the thing, though, man. Like, I still think those guys are going to be good. I just don't think they've gained enough experience yet, because you see flashes of it all the time. Like I said, again, preface all of this by saying, yes, it's Bethune-Cookman. They are an FCS school. But you see flashes of it all the time. Like, I had no idea D. Wiggins had the speed he had. I don't care who he's going up against. He was a on Saturday.
I'll give you that.
No idea where that came from.
I'll give you that.
Brian Hightower making nice catches. Like, they have the talent. It's just, I think, just experience. It's just going to take, I like to see.
But here's the thing. It didn't take. Go back to 2009. Go back to 2009 when you had LaRon Bird, Leonard Hankerson. You had what's the little short guy plays for the Chargers?
You had Collier too, and you had Benjamin.
And you had Travis Benjamin, Tommy Streeter. There were never drop issues. Never. And it's not like all these guys were highly touted. They were solid. Like we've always had receivers that you can depend on. This class, you go through the 2018 class. You're 5-star. When you're a 5-star, the reason you have that number on there isn't because you're going to wind up being the best wide receiver in the country
Mark
or better.
Pope was a fringe five.
Okay, regardless, a 4-star, 5-star, highly rated. Here's my thing. It's not just your talent that I expect you to come to college with. I expect you, once you get here, to have the body and the frame to put on weight and be and like if you get in here, whether it's your fault or not, and you stay injured through your entire career, then it's one, either your work ethic's not good enough to get your body right. Two, yeah, you might just be unlucky. Or three, you're just not very good in avoiding contact. And you saw Mark Pope, yeah, sure. He finally killed it as a non-consensus 5-star. He finally killed it against Bethune Cookman his sophomore year. And experience does play a part. But then
Takes
he
guys long enough.
every time he touches the ball, if someone touches hits him with their pinky, he goes down. Like he's got no breakaway as far as breaking a tackle. He got hurt as soon as he got rolled up because he's so little. Like he's just not. I don't know why people are so amped up for Mark Pope. He's not better than Jeff Thomas as far as his elusiveness. All that we heard in high school. He's not made an impact yet, which you're supposed to by your sophomore year if you're a fringe 5-star. So you set him aside. Your other 4-star transferred in Ezzard to Georgia Tech. Then you've got Hightower, who killed it his freshman year in spring, scored a touchdown against LSU. He was a guy that I'm like, okay, that's a solid receiver. He's going to be good to go. Since got injured, and since then has had an insane amount of drops, and even going to the North Carolina game when you're supposed to be working on that, a ball hits him right in the numbers for a 10-yard pass, and he drops it. That's why he's not playing. Like, yeah, maybe one or two of these guys by their junior or senior year can step up, but when you're a blue chip wide receiver, we can't wait for you to be a junior and a senior. That's what separates us. People wonder why we weren't beating North Carolina and these other teams. When you recruit 2 and 3 stars, those are guys you got to develop. Your 4 and 5 stars are expected to produce early. Maybe not freshman year, but by your junior year. There's nobody in that 2018 class that has yet to do anything impressive other than one big run by Wiggins that was, yeah, I'm with you, insanely fast. I believe one of these guys will end up being a solid receiver for us at some point. But I'm off the bus on this entire receiving core.
I
I'm
don't
like, they're not nearly as good as I thought they were.
I don't know. I just think it's a lot of. I'm not making excuses, but I think it's a lot of different factors. I think it's the new scheme, new coaching, and I think, like you said about Pope, I think also you got to realize, I think Feely is going to do wonders for a lot of these guys too. That's why I do think towards the middle of this year, you're going to start to see them flourish a little bit more. Like I said, again, preface, it was Bethune-Cookman, but I have never seen Mark Pope look like that in a game against anyone. Like, he looked comfortable. He looked like he was playing, he looked like he was playing high school ball again. He looked like he was comfortable, catching the ball, running after the catch, everything. In any other game, I haven't seen him look
But
nearly
you
as close
can't
to.
but you can't catch a ball and then one of these small, undersized Bethune Cookman
You don't know.
DBs
That could
roll
have been
you up.
a freak thing, man. You don't know. People get hurt. I mean,
Listen, it's every
apparently,
time. Like when they throw
yeah,
him on the little slants. I mean, when he gets hit, it's like getting hit by a Mack truck. He's just so little, man. Like it's like cool. Maybe you'll
whatever,
bust down
man.
the field.
Whatever, man. Do you remember a guy by the name of Roscoe Parrish? Do you remember a guy, Roscoe Parrish was like the
You can't
size of
compare him
like,
to these guys.
but that's him. That would be Mark Pope's role. Like, if Mark Pope becomes a solid player in college football, the type of guy he's going to look like is a Roscoe Parrish. He's never going to be. And you remember when Roscoe Parrish got hit by that FSU linebacker, how high he flew in the air? Like, the dude weighed like 170 pounds soaking wet. Like, that's going to be the type of guy he's going to be. He's
But when
never.
you're a highly rated kid like him, okay. Now, yeah, if you're saying he's going to be a solid receiver for us by his junior senior year, okay, fair. But that's not good for where we're at because he's one of our highly rated kids. He's one of these guys that everyone's saying, this is what's going to make our receiving core very good. So if we're downgrading this kid to by his junior senior year when he learns enough of the playbook, he maybe will be a pretty good
No,
receiver for
he's
us.
always going
That's
to
not
be.
good enough.
His ceiling is a supporting role, shifty slot guy. That's his role. That's going to be his role. I think now a guy I think that is going to flourish eventually once he get out of his own head, because like you said, the frame is there. I think the skill is there. I do think Brian Hightower, at least by the end of this year, will show a lot, because I've always been super high on him. He's got the body frame. He is the prototypical number one receiver on a college football team. If you look at him, like he looks like one. So I think by the end of this year, you're going to start to see some of those guys, once they get comfortable with the playbook, once they get comfortable with everything, they're going to start flourishing more. And that's what I'm hoping to see, at least. The
Well, I'm
talent
not.
is there. You said the stars are there. It's there.
That doesn't matter. But that's what I'm saying is there's been a
Give it
fluke
time, man.
somewhere in
Give
the
it time. You
recruiting.
got to remember last year. I throw last year out. I throw any experience, anything that they
I
did.
don't throw drops out. I don't throw drops out.
I get that, but I'm
You
saying
you learn you don't learn to catch your junior senior year of college football. You learn to catch when you're in literally kindergarten and middle school. You
he
learn to
hasn't
catch
dropped
in
that
your
many. You
JV
just
years.
remember that one drop because it was a big drop.
No, but listen, but this has been okay. This is what also concerns me. The offensive staff, okay, which no one had respect for, so we dismissed it. The Miami offensive staff under Mark Richt said these guys aren't good enough yet. Okay, they're freshmen and your offense sucks. Now they're sophomores. They've been in a year under the strength and conditioning program, or 8 months, whatever you want to say. All right, sure, okay. Well, now it's a new look offense. Now they still can't perform. When you're talented, you're talented. Period. Amon Richards was a freshman, made it happen. You know what I mean? Again, not saying these guys will never be any good. What I'm saying is Miami's receiving core is nowhere near where I think a lot of people thought it would be and where it should be. We can't wait for these kids to be juniors and seniors. That's what we do with 3 stars, like a Mike Harley. You know what I mean?
Dead horse here. Let's move on.
Anyway, moving on. Let's talk something positive. Jaron Williams. I mean, just fantastic. And I think what people don't give a lot of credit to Mark Richt is I would want a N'Kosi Perry to be my backup. I think that's a pretty decent backup. I think he's
pretty solid too.
Okay, so
it was there. Everything looked great from him.
And then you win a few games and you get even better quarterback in Jaron Williams. And then had Mark Richt knew how to call an offense, he probably gets an even better quarterback. Like Mark Richt obviously knew what he was doing in talent when it came to quarterbacks. And I think it is good that we have 3 to 4 years of Jaron Williams. I think he looked excellent.
Fantastic, yeah. He just looks more. I just think, like, I'm telling you, by the middle of this year, this kid's gonna look like okay. So this is the way I like to. This is how I think this season's gonna go for Jaron. I don't know if you remember when DeAndre Francois started for Florida State, and I'm not trying to talk about now DeAndre Francois because he regressed a lot. But when DeAndre Francois started for FSU, he was a redshirt freshman. He started against Ole Miss in a neutral site game, his first ever start, kind of similar to Jaron Williams with Florida. Struggled a little bit, but they ended up pulling it out. That team ended up, I think, going like 3-2 or something in their first 5 games. And then DeAndre Francois got comfortable. He started balling out, and they ended up, like, I'm pretty sure, winning out. And then they went to the Orange Bowl that year, and they played Michigan and beat Michigan. I can see this season going like that. Because every single game I see him play, he looks more and more comfortable. He looks more and more comfortable with the offense, everything around him, the speed of the game. I just think by the time we get to Virginia Tech, with the bye week, especially before that, I think he's going to be rearing and ready to go. Like, I'm not going to be worried as I was, like, the first couple games.
Okay, so it's safe to say so far, Dan Enos has won us over, right? The play calling has been, I think 90% of the time I think it's been very good. It's been what?
I think it's going to get better too once he has even more faith.
Well, yeah, this is just the basis of his offense. Like we haven't quite tapped into his entire playbook yet, and I think we look pretty good. I think that let's talk about coaches overall for a minute and any concerns there. My 2 concerns is, especially in the North Carolina game, it was upsetting, is one, in the red zone and in the beginning of the game, we were extremely conservative. Now, I will defend Enos on it a little bit to fans who are upset that we were so conservative early on. When you're in an away game and the team just marched down the field on you, scored 3 points, you get the ball. What you don't want to do is turn the ball over and give them a chance to score again and get the momentum going even more. So you try to go out there and feel them out a little bit. You're a little conservative. It just happened to go 3 and out. They get the ball back. Boom, they score again. Now you're down 10-0. Now you really can't turn the ball over. Or it's really, really bad. And you believe you can trust your defense. So you go out conservative again. You go 3 and out again, or 1 or 2 first downs, punt. They score again, and then now you have to open it up. So I think people that are mad that Enos, was a little conservative at the beginning, you have to understand the situation. And then in the red zone, kind of the same case. I didn't, and that's twice against Florida and against him. I'm not liking running to the short side of the field when your offensive line's not great. But a little conservative in the beginning when we should have been throwing the ball into the end zone. I was a little upset about that, but I don't think there's much to complain about Enos. I think he's done a great job. Defensively, though, that entire North Carolina game was a defensive nightmare, and I actually blame it at least 50% on the coaches, especially that 4th and 17 call. Like
Yeah.
we're not going to dwell on UNC, but what do you think as far as Blake Baker?
I like Blake Baker. I think in the long term, he's going to be a very solid defensive coordinator. I think there's going to be some learning curve. You got to remember this is a guy that came from Louisiana Tech program. He's going to go up against more talented, skilled players week in and week out. I know it's usually a scheme thing, but I think there's going to be a little bit of a learning curve for him. But I do think he has a solid foundation. I think long-term wise, he's going to be a very good defensive coordinator. I definitely think we're going to be fine on who we've hired on both sides of the ball with Dan Enos. My worry with Dan Enos is that Dan Enos will be here for 2 years and he'll be gone.
Most likely.
I do think Blake Baker will be here for a while, which is nice, which should offer some stability. But I have no complaints on really either side of the ball, like you said, other than that 4th and 17 call. That's just unexcusable. And the one thing I didn't like with Blake Baker is he didn't seem to take any responsibility. In the press conference, he kind of just said, he pretty much kind of threw the players under the bus, which I've always hated that. I think no coach should throw players under the bus. At the end of the day, you have to put your players in the best positions to win. These are 20, 19, 21-year-old kids. You shouldn't be throwing them under the bus. I didn't like that. But I think the long term he will be a solid hire. So I think we have a solid foundation. And actually, one of the hires that I've liked so far is Hickson, the running back coach. I know running back coaches don't do much, but the running backs have looked fantastic. DJ Dallas has looked great. I know we had the conversation a couple weeks ago about ceilings and floors, and he's looking more and more like he's going to get.
Well, that's before you dive into that. That's what I was going to mention real quick. Let's just talk about what we've underestimated and then what we have overestimated, I guess we could say. And then that would be one position. I think DJ Dallas as a whole, that's something I think we underestimated. I think we underestimated how good he could be. Thought we kind of hit his ceiling, and I think he's kind of busted through that ceiling a little bit. Now, man. I mean, not that I think he's a first-round draft pick, but definitely he's looked far better.
He gets to be top 3 rounds, I think.
I don't think 1 or 2, but 3 and further. I mean, yeah. Yeah, I can see a 3. I think he
could get picked in the 4th round. He can get picked in the 4th round.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, I agree. I mean, he's definitely kind of busted through his ceiling a little bit. So I think we underestimated him. Underestimated Jaron just simply because he was a freshman.
Can I say who I've overestimated? The linebackers, man. I
don't
know what is going on with them.
Well, I'll tell you what's going on with that.
Terrible.
And I've said this for a long time. There's a reason that the type of linebackers that Manny Diaz is recruiting now is completely different physically than who we recruited there.
By the way, in the first
so Sam Brooks, who do we recruit with him?
Avery Huff.
Huff. These guys are taller, they're leaner, they're faster. What you have, and this is what Miami fans have to understand is our 3 linebackers are run-stopping linebackers, and that's it. And I've said for a long time, people who argued about the striker position, that was brought in to get McLeod off the field, get your 2 best run stoppers in Pickney and in Quarterman to stay on the field, but be able to get a safety kind of hybrid guy in there to be in pass coverage. What we're recruiting now is much more athletic guys at linebackers in order to play the pass better, because offenses are getting so spread out so fast. But in year 1, you had to recruit some guys. You had to develop some guys. And I think Manny Diaz did a good job recruiting those three guys, McLeod, and our trio of seniors, and developing them. But what you saw for the last 2 years is you saw Sheldrick Redwine and Jaquan Johnson cover up a lot of mistakes.
Clean
They
up their
covered up. They covered busted runs. They covered, in the passing game. And now that you have freshman safeties who rely on you more, and you're not relying on the safeties, now you're seeing set. Shaq Quarterman's not a first, not a second, maybe a third round linebacker, and that's our best linebacker. And even then, Pickney's making plays to be better.
I honestly think McLeod has the most NFL potential, but I think Mandy hit on it the other day. Like he just hasn't been able to see the field because of the striker position. How he hasn't really. And then they asked him if he's going to redshirt, and they said no, he's not going to redshirt, which is kind of effed up because it's the kid's senior year, and he has a lot of potential to make the NFL. But I guess
he's got an NFL body, but he's never done anything to make the NFL. That's it.
I don't know. He looked fantastic his freshman year.
He's a decent run stopper. You know what I mean? But you haven't. Your defense has you, and it might be on the defensive play calling, but you haven't done anything to go to the NFL. Shaq has made some plays. Pickney's made some plays to get seen by the NFL. And even then, I wouldn't be shocked if they fall to the 4th, 5th, 6th rounds because they cannot pass coverage at all. And I think part of that's them, and part of it is the coaching. One thing that Manny Diaz's defense has never been good at is zone coverage. And that's what goes back to Blake Baker, a guy who, I think another reason we're kind of getting exposed in areas of the defense is I think Blake Baker is playing like he's got better talent than he does. You might see that play in 4th and 17 if that was Alabama. But what I don't get is you have 6 guys up to the line of scrimmage. You've got 3 guys back at the first down line, and they're playing a soft zone. And North Carolina only sent 3 receivers. So you literally could have had 3 guys playing man and 2 safeties, 5 on 3, and blitzed the other 6, just like you did, and probably got home quicker. But instead, you blitzed 5. You had 1 guy that was showing blitz and drops back and covered nobody, and they just ran in between the zones. I mean, that was the most atrocious play calling that I've ever seen, and that worries me a little bit with Blake Baker. I'm a little concerned with him. And I think people were kind of overestimating him a little bit because of who we thought we had defensively. So I think we've overestimated the linebackers and overestimated the defensive coach.
Can I just say
go ahead.
Quick? I want to say too. Who's been a surprise so far, and we should probably take everything back that we've said about him in the past. Robert Knowles has been pretty solid back there. So,
Robert Knowles just hasn't messed up.
I'm just saying, man, if you go back and watch the games, he's in position, he's making plays, and I felt awesome for him on Saturday when he got to wear that turnover chain. Don't act like you didn't feel good for him.
I'm happy for Robert Knowles.
And what did I say earlier in the year? That who I think is going to be probably the best defensive player on the field, Romeo Finley. I'm telling you, that kid is a baller. And he is going to make an NFL roster, and he's going to have a long NFL career.
Romeo. Okay, let's talk about Romeo. Romeo's an example of, I think, a hot topic on Miami right now is Manny Diaz's approach to recruiting, which is he's not going to offer kids as early as their freshman year, more than likely, unless they're extraordinarily talented. He's not going to accept commits early, and he's not going to stick with a lot of commits if they commit and then continue to visit other schools. A lot of people are up in arms. They believe you have to play that game with these kids in order to get them nowadays. It's the same approach that Dabo Swinney has taken at Clemson, and their argument has been, well, Clemson's winning championships, that's why they can do that. Wrong. Clemson is winning championships because they did that. They built their program because they did that. What Dabo Swinney did was he took less talented kids, developed them, but he took kids who absolutely wanted to be there. And so I think Miami fans think that because we're Miami, we should be competing for these top 5 stars immediately, but it doesn't work that way. What happens when you get talent, but you don't evaluate these kids on how much they love the school and how much their work ethic is, you might get a guy like Jeff Thomas want to leave, a guy like Lawrence Cager throws his hands up, drops balls. You get guys that are talented, but not all bought in. You don't get guys like Romeo Finley. If you had 11 Romeo Finleys offensively and defensively, you're 3-0 right now.
No,
Period.
sure. And that's what and I've seen a lot of backlash on Twitter about, Manny making the approach and like how like you were saying, people are like, "Oh, how could you do that if you're not winning?" Bro, like I want guys that want to be here. I want guys that because you like you said like we were talking about with the receivers. We've seen it time and time again for the last 15 years. All these guys that come in with all this hype and they don't have work ethic. They don't have, the will, the determination, and we're going to talk a little bit to Jeremy, talk to Jeremy in a little bit about UCF. They're a prime example. They got 2-star, 3-star guys all over the field, but you know what? Those guys want to go on the field with you and kick your ass. And it's nice to see because at the end of the day, it is, college football kind of has turned into a little bit of a prima donna sport in a way of like the star system and the All American Bowls and all this, like the commit videos and all this stuff. Get me a guy that the moment he steps on campus wants to get better and wants to go win. Like that's what I want. Like, yeah, it's nice to get the 4 or 5-star guys. Like a guy like DJ, who's a 4-star, he was a 4-star player, but he has the will and the determination. He wants to go win. Like that's the guys I want. Like it's great if you can get the stars, but you also want to get the kids that want to work. And I like Manny doing that approach because I'm tired of these guys committing 2 years before they sign on the dotted line, say, "Oh, I love Miami. Miami is my dream school." I've heard that 1,000 times. And then when push comes to shove, and Georgia comes knocking at the door, and Alabama comes knocking at the door, they just leave us in the rearview mirror, and it's time to just take a stand. Like I love it. I think it's great.
Yeah, and that's the thing is recruiting this way gives you a roster of kids who are going to compete hard, who are going to buy in, and that's not going to win you the championship. What it's going to do is it's going to solidify your winning percentages in the ACC, and it's going to win you recruiting classes. So
Yeah.
when you have that's what fans need to understand. We are not competing for a national championship this year, next year, and probably not the next year, and maybe not even the year after that. We're just not. We could definitely compete for a playoff spot in probably 2-3 years, but we're not competing for a championship. What we need to compete for now, and we've brushed over it with our lack of depth at linebacker, our miscues at wide receiver, on offensive line. What we're competing for now is recruiting. And when you get a bunch of Romeo Finleys who go out there and make plays for you and make enough plays to beat the North Carolinas, to beat the Dukes and Virginias and Virginia Techs, and you're consistently in that ACC championship, win or lose, you're consistently in that ACC championship, that brings you the top 10 class you need, and then another, and then another, and then you're competing with Clemson in the ACC championship, and then you're competing for a playoff spot. But as long as you continue to go, well, we've got 2 or 3, 4 or 5-star kids that, we're just taking them because they're highly rated and we're trying to win recruiting classes. It doesn't work that way. I listened to Dabo Swinney say himself, I'm not trying to win a recruiting class. And after he won a national championship, his next class was 17th in the country because his version is, I'm not offering you when you're a freshman. I'm not offering you when you're a sophomore. If that pisses you off, go somewhere else. I could care less. Because if you want to be at Clemson, you're going to wait until you get offered. You're going to commit, and you're going to come. And you're going to win. And I'm all for Diaz's approach to that because top 10 classes and all that for 90% of the country outside of Clemson and Alabama is not consistently putting anybody in a national championship spot. Michigan's always there. Ohio State's always there. Georgia's always there. Ohio State's got one championship between the three of them. So you got to get guys to buy in.
I love it. Let me. I think we hit a lot. Let me ask you a question here. To kind of round out the state of the U. I want to know right now, with what you've seen, the first 3 games, do you think that we win the next 5 games at home, including the Bethune game? Do you think we win these next 4 games at home?
I absolutely think we can. I think the problem is.
Do you think we do? I don't want to hear can. Do you think we do? The only one that scares me is the Virginia game. I think we should easily win Virginia Tech. We should easily win, obviously, Central Michigan. And Georgia Tech looks terrible. And it's at home. The home games are just different. You know that.
I think I was really a big advocate on blowing Virginia out by 2 touchdowns at least, which isn't really a blowout, but it's a big win. I still think that there's a very good chance that happens. I do think Miami will win out. I do think that they will win out, and here's why. I think I will give Virginia a little more respect than I did originally, but not because of them.
Went
They're
out the whole season or went out these next 4 games?
Yeah. I just think Miami's going to win that game. I'm not even going to really
No, I agree.
dwell on them. I
agree.
think Virginia is the
sets up-
only. Go ahead.
It sets up perfectly because like I said, we're gonna win Central Michigan. I think we take care of Virginia Tech. They look terrible this year, and then you roll in 3-2, 3 wins in a row. You won your first ACC game. It's a home game at night, 8:00. It is on a Friday, but it's at 8. It's on ESPN, national coverage game. You know how Hard Rock gets at night. That place is gonna be bumping. I just don't think. We saw last year we almost beat them, and we had the most inept offense in the country. On the road. Like, I just don't think they have they really improved themselves that much to where they can roll into Hard Rock and beat us.
I'm not Virginia Tech aside, because I think we both agree that's not really. Again, at this point, you can't count anybody out.
No, I
mean, here's my concern: is North Carolina ran 5th place, so I'm not sold on Blake Baker. I believe if we lose to,
it's a road.
I believe that's great. I believe if we lose to Virginia at home, it will be because of 2 things: missed field goals. Because here's the thing: they run a very good defense. We will get into the red zone, and we will have to settle for a field goal. And at some point in the game, it will have to happen. And if you can't hit your field goals, there's a good chance you lose the ball game. 2, if Blake Baker calls plays a ridiculous game. Like, here's the thing: his game plan against Florida, excellent. His game plan against North Carolina, terrible. So you don't know what you're going to get. You know what I mean? Now, obviously, we can say he had a great game plan against Bethune. He did, but it's Bethune. We'll have to see what happens. Virginia's my only concern there is what we still know is the quarterback can't throw. Like you said, it's a home game for us. It's going to rattle them a little bit. They barely squeaked by Florida State, who's not very good. But at the end of the day, they play solid defense. We're going to have to score touchdowns. Jaren's going to have to be on fire. We can't miss field goals. So beforehand, when we talked about this before and I was all apt on Miami blowing Virginia out, I assumed the defense would just be at least some of whatever version of itself from last year, and we kick field goals. Because literally, the defense could be set aside for the Florida game. You make your 26-yard field goal, you win that game. You play North Carolina, you make your 26-yard field goal, you'll probably win that game. So you go into Virginia, you got to make your short field goals, and you're going to have to kick them because Virginia is going to stop you in the red zone at least once in that game. But I do think Miami can win all their games. I am actually more concerned, and that is the game that could, if we lose one, it would either be the coaching staff screwing us over against Virginia, or they do their job, we look great, and then we underestimate Louisville. But again, all being at home, I think if we win those games, the crowd comes in, and I do think that would play a part in Louisville. But I respect Louisville. I respect Scott Satterfield and his offensive play calling. They can keep a game close. And again, our field goal kicker's not any good, and he's missed again against Bethune. And that's my only. I'm just scratching my head. Like, that's my only worry.
No, I get you. I think we win these next 4 games. I think we go 5-2.
All winnable.
5-2. 5-2, top 20 ranking going into Pitt, and then the rest of the season.
All winnable.
Yeah. All right. You want to get Jeremy on here?
Yeah, man. So guys, we're gonna talk. Go ahead and text him. Let him let's get him on real quick. And explain to everybody who he is.
We're gonna have a guy. His name's Jeremy Taché. So he has 2 podcasts. He actually works for WSVN down in Miami. Really, really knowledgeable guy. He actually hosts a Swings and Misses podcast, which is actually the Marlins podcast, and he's on another podcast where he does all of college football, but he's a huge UCF fan, very knowledgeable. So I'd love to get him on here to kind of get his take on UCF. The situation that everyone always wants to talk about, is UCF good enough?
Yeah. So this is just to kind of round out the podcast, guys. This is a lot of Miami fans disliking UCF, and UCF disliking everyone else. And this is just going to kind of have some banter back and forth, kind of see what the state of mind is in the UCF program versus the UM program. Obviously, where we are in Florida State UCF is even more in power, that they are one of the best schools in the country, in the state, which, I'm not really going to argue with. But we'll see what our guys got to say and just have some conversation about it.
Yay, what's up, Jeremy?
Hey, how's it going?
What's
What's
going
going on, man?
on?
What's up with you guys?
Not
Well,
much.
we're gonna talk a little UCF football, see what your views are on it. I think you and I are
love it.
We'll have a little banter
Yeah.
back and forth, and we'll let Kev kind of head it up.
Perfect. That sounds great.
Jeremy. So, welcome to the Canecast. Just go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell people where they can find you on Twitter. Tell them about your podcasts, all that.
Sweet. So, hey guys, I'm Jeremy Taché. You can find me on Twitter at Jeremy Taché. That's Tache. I work as an associate producer at WSVN down here in Miami. So I've been really covering every, ironically, Canes game for almost, for the last 2 seasons, and now up through this season as well, cutting highlights, etc., listening through every pointless soundbite. And I also am the co-host and producer of Swings and Mishes, which is a Miami Marlins podcast with Craig Mish, formerly of Sirius XM Radio, now of FNTSY Radio. And we've been covering the Marlins now all of this season, some of last season as well. And then I am a UCF alum, so have been watching that team obviously on their rise, and covered the team while I was in school. And so now, been working down here in Miami for a couple of years.
Yeah, awesome. You have another podcast, don't you? A college football podcast also? You can shout that one out.
Oh, yeah. So sometimes forget about all the different stuff. So a podcast with Dimitri Zamaris. You can find us on YouTube, actually. We do that as a YouTube show. It's called Preferred Walk-Ons. So if you search the @WePreferWalk-Ons on Twitter, you can find the links to all of our conference previews, which are obviously already being proven wrong, and each of our weekly previews and reviews that we've been doing the last couple of weeks. So we give you about an hour every week, previewing some of the big games and reviewing some of the big games from the previous week.
Awesome, Jeremy. So I'll just kick it off here. I want to preface this also for the audience because I don't know if all the Canes fans know. Don't kill me. I did go to UCF. So me and Jeremy have that in common. I love the Knights. So I do support them. I watch their games every game. I actually have season tickets to both UM and UCF. I know I'm crazy. But Jeremy, just to kick it off here, why does the nation have kind of a sour taste in their mouth when it comes to the UCF fan base? Is there a reason? I know you could probably hit on that pretty well because I know you're pretty outspoken on Twitter.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is?
I think UCF got a little bit of the negative millennial rap, right? Where there's a lot of people that are very anti-millennial because they think millennials are like, we want it now, it's ours, no attention, the ADHD generation, etc., and deserving a trophy, right? And so I think a lot of people, when UCF sort of burst onto the scene in 2017 with their undefeated season, and from about game 6 or 7, were complaining about being underranked, which we've learned, they were at the time. A lot of people looked at that as the same sort of thing with millennials. Oh, you deserve a trophy just because you're around. And so ultimately, when UCF then declared themselves national champions, they went from sort of the lovable underdog to, all right, we hate these people now because they're deciding they deserve a trophy when we've told them they don't get one. What's funny is that in other ways, America has always been this sort of, plucky, you work hard, you win, and you deserve what you get, an anti-establishment sort of existence, right? The American populace has always sort of been that way. And yet when it came to UCF and they said, we worked hard, we earned it, we won every game we played, we deserve this thing, America sort of revolted against that and went with the establishment. And so now it became this ultimately really polarizing thing. You were either with UCF or you were vehemently against them. And so the UCF fan base dug their heels into that, myself included, and loved playing sort of that wrestling heel.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love, I like to compare it, and it's very different in terms of the origin story. But rooting for UCF reminds me of rooting for the Big Three with LeBron back in the day, where it's like you're hated, but you're still going to win, and you're going to rub it in people's faces when you do. And it's that same sort of like, I love playing the villain, and I think UCF has really enjoyed that villain throwing on the cape for their team and digging their heels into that. And so, understandably, a lot of the teams, with the big name university, with the big name on the front of the jersey, understandably, are not exactly a big fan of that.
No, and I completely agree. Kyle, do you have anything to kind of hit on that?
Well, I think from being on an outside perspective, I think, obviously Miami fans can relate. Miami was the anti-establishment team in the 70s and 80s, being a private school and taking a lot of money and a lot of wins from some of these big schools. So I can definitely appreciate what UCF is doing so far. I think, I've been on the UCF bandwagon, especially in year one, I think 2017. Definitely a team that I thought could make noise in the playoffs. And even before Tua came in, while Jalen Hurts was in, I thought they could even compete with Alabama. Not saying they would necessarily win, but they could definitely compete. I was all for that. I was a big advocate. I think where a lot of people jumped off the UCF bandwagon is when they proclaim themselves national champions. I think the fact that that is over your stadium is not a good look. I think that it is a little too far, because at the end of the day, you really do not play anybody. And then that one big game against Auburn, which was impressive, but you also take the state of mind where Auburn was in. They beat Alabama, they beat Georgia, and they still weren't in the playoffs because of their schedule. So you had a team who really had played LSU, played, again, Alabama, Georgia, Florida. They played a hard schedule. They beat these top-ranked teams. They still didn't get in, and then UCF is beating nobody, and then they play each other, and they beat Auburn, who happened to beat Alabama. Now UCF's proclaiming they should be in. Now, I still believe, because I think them beating Auburn is a testament enough that they should have been in, but that's hindsight. So you roll into 2018, at no point did I think UCF was a playoff team. I was definitely rooting for them against LSU. I was all for that, but once they lost Mackenzie Milton, I thought that kind of ended their chances there. And truthfully, maybe you swap Notre Dame and put them in. I think that you'd have an argument there. I think they could definitely beat Notre Dame for sure. And I think that UCF's still making a case for themselves when they go and they beat Power 5 teams like Stanford, like they're nobody. I think that's incredibly impressive. So I think that the point of the anti-establishment, I can definitely see that. I enjoy it. I'm rooting for it. Not a good look with the national championship thing, but, I think that UCF hasn't been a legitimate contender for a championship in 2018, and really nothing yet has said anything in 2019, or and we'll see. But I'm on the fence with it, and I do enjoy watching UCF. I live right here by the stadium, so I'm with it.
Jeremy, what do you think has been, obviously, Miami had a decent year in 2017. That kind of fell to the wayside towards the last three games. But other than that, the last 2.5 years, you can say, I guess, UCF has been the best team in Florida. What do you think that's attributed to? Because obviously they don't, we all know the recruiting rankings and all of this nonsense. What do you think exactly that's been attributed to? Has it been the system that they put in place with, the offense? Has it been the type of players that they've been recruiting? What would you say has been their number one key to the success?
Yeah, I think speed on both sides of the ball. So while UCF defensively, obviously this season they played very well defensively. But up until this season, let's be honest, in 2017 and 2018, 2017, it was Shaquem Griffin coming up with a big sack and Mike Hughes defending an entire side of the field by himself, and that was about it. And last year, it was very much a bend, don't break type of defense that forced turnovers when possible. But the speed had everything to do with that. Recruiting fast linebackers, fast defensive backs allows you to, even when you're slightly out of position, go make a play, right? And offensively, that's exactly what they did. Whether it was Scott Frost or now under, Coach Heupel, the recruiting speed was such a big part of it. And so being able to properly, schematically put your players in position to succeed, get really quick guys like Otis Anderson and Adrian Killens in open space, and get chunk plays that way. And really the tempo, what we don't really talk about, and I'm surprised that UF and UM, for that matter, haven't used this to their advantage. Playing in the state of Florida matters. Like, playing with these temperatures and this humidity, your advantage should be something that all of these schools do. And UCF decided to take advantage of that. I mean, when you looked at Stanford this past week, those guys were like passing out on the sideline. It's hot. It's 3:30 in the afternoon, and you've got UCF running, 8 plays in 40 seconds. And so really, I think instituting that level of speed and recruiting to the system, as opposed to just recruiting the highest possible star player that they can, was an advantage. And then now, over the last year and a half under Josh Heupel, they've recruited some big boys on the offensive line. And so now on the offensive line, they can compete with just about anybody.
Yeah, yeah, all of that I agree with you. We've kind of been an advocate of Miami running a spread system like that for a long time, using their speed, using the temperatures of South Florida, and it giving you the ability. And here's the thing: why it would be good for Miami is you copy that blueprint that UCF has, and then that you start winning the games like UCF does when they do play a Pitt or a Stanford. You win those games in the ACC. You immediately have the ability to recruit the 4 and 5 stars that maybe it would take a very long time for UCF to begin to bring in. But I agree with everything you say offensively. I think that's a great advantage. I think you keep building on that, they can have a lot of success, and they're definitely fun to watch. But you also see in Tallahassee, Florida State trying to copy that a little bit and doing a very bad job. And, last year, the offensive – now, granted, they have no offensive line, but last year it not working at all offensively. This year with Bryles, it's coming together a little more, but now it doesn't complement their defense. They tire out,
right,
and they don't help them. So it's definitely a good blueprint UCF has. Very impressive, and I do enjoy watching it.
Jeremy, where do you think UCF should be ranked right now?
So personally, I think UCF should be ranked 7th in the nation. I am well aware of the fact that Alabama, like that, so that group of the top 5, right, that we knew coming into the year: Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, Oklahoma, and who am I forgetting out of that group? Ohio State, Oklahoma, Clemson, obviously. And then LSU got their big win over Texas, right? So they deserve to be there as well. And for that matter, LSU, with basically the same 2 teams, you could make arguments for both of those teams as to who they were missing, whatever. But LSU beat UCF last year. I'm comfortable with them being 6th. After that, I have a really hard time with anyone telling me that there's been a team that's been more impressive than UCF, right? So I can understand later in the year dropping UCF to the fact that, they get a win over Tulsa and maybe Auburn gets a win over Florida, right? I can understand teams jumping there and saying, okay, I can now see that this team is obviously better or has a better resume than UCF does. But at the present moment, given the last couple of years and so many of those players still being there, given the way the offensive line has performed, given the way that UCF absolutely emulsified Stanford, dominated from the moment the game started. And that's not the same team that it's been in years past, but Stanford averages about 10 wins a year over the last decade and is a respected Power 5 team. They're not one of the 20 best teams in the country right now, but they'll still end up as a top 40 program at the worst probably this season. They'll still probably go win 7-8 games. That was impressive enough for me, given the last couple of years, to say, yeah, after that group of 6, you can't tell me anybody right now definitively is better. And so that's where I would have them. I can understand later in the year changing that around when other teams get maybe bigger wins. But it's difficult for me for anyone to make the case after about 6 teams that they're definitively better.
I think that, so we would agree Clemson, Alabama, Georgia, LSU, Oklahoma, 5. Pretty good case right now. Not super confident that UCF would beat these teams. Not that they couldn't, but that they,
sure.
I don't think they could beat Clemson or Alabama right now. Probably not Georgia. Probably not LSU. Maybe Oklahoma, simply because Oklahoma's defense is atrocious.
Sure.
And so I don't know if I could confidently put them at 6 or 7, simply because you look at Auburn with a very good defense, mediocre offense. So the argument's there, okay? But they beat in Oregon, which is a little more impressive if we're talking about impressive wins. So maybe Auburn in front of them. You look at Ohio State. Ohio State never does anything impressive, but always has a good offense. So maybe that's a 50-50, like who scores last.
Yeah, spoken like a true Canes fan talking about Ohio State.
So 50-50 ball. But, truthfully, Texas is an argument, Wisconsin's an argument, simply because Wisconsin's had some, they've won big. They've looked a lot better this year with a new quarterback now that they've got rid of oh boy, that's down at Florida State now. But I'm with you. I'm with you with top 10. And listen, when you go and you play a Power 5 team, that's one of the better teams in a Power 5 conference like a Stanford, who's not elite but is solid and plays fundamental football, and you pull away from them the way you did for the third year in a row, there is no denying that. And so I would be with you in that case, the top 10, and I would be far more confident if you had a healthy Mackenzie Milton. So I'm with you on that.
Here's my thing on the rankings, and I actually put out my top 25 the other day. I had UCF at 9. I got a little backlash from a couple buddies because I put Notre Dame ahead of them, which but preseason rankings do matter, and you know what, they've just held up their end of the bargain to this end, but they will falter like they always do every single year anyways.
Right.
So it doesn't really matter. But I definitely had.
I saw a stat. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just saw a stat that Notre Dame since the year 2000 is 1-17 against teams ranked in the top 5.
That's absurd.
Yeah. They haven't won a major bowl game since it's either, I think, maybe the late 80s, the early 90s.
Well,
look, wild. Sorry, I'm sorry to interrupt. I just saw that stat before I started speaking with you guys and had
like not even a New Year's Six, not a before it was a New Year's Six, not even nothing. So
we'll just look at 2 years ago. They had Miami wasn't top 5. Miami was number 7, but Miami won 48.
Right, but they got annihilated.
41-8. So I mean, they just don't show up in big games. They never have, at least since like the 80s and 90s when, obviously things were different back then. But like I was saying, I had UCF number 9. I had them in front of Florida number 10. Just because, as ugly as that first game was, it's a rivalry game, week 0. It's a tough game as it is. So I do give them a little bit of credit for finally pulling that game out, even though we did choke. Going on the road, Kentucky's a decent team. I actually would kind of put Kentucky, at least today, not in the last 7-8 years as a program, but today probably in the same spectrum as Stanford. They actually had a pretty good team the last couple of years.
They're very good team.
If you're making the point that Florida might be better than UCF, in no world would I bet on Florida beating UCF. I
had them ranked behind. I'm just saying that's why I had them so close to UCF. Just
sure.
They've had, regardless of what you think of Miami, that's a tough game. It's a rivalry game. And then you go on the road and you beat Kentucky, regardless of how lucky it was, with your backup quarterback. But yeah, what I saw from UCF on Saturday, the fact that game it was ridiculous. It was 38-7 in the third quarter. It's absurd. Like, it's absurdity. And it's kind of like, as a Canes fan, it's, a little bit jealousy in the fact of like, like we've said in the past, you see all these 2-3 star players just running rampant, and you're like, okay, we've had top 15 recruiting classes probably 4 of the last 5 years. Like, why is this so difficult? So, it's one of those things. They've instilled a culture there. They've instilled, their system, and it works. It's kind of like Oregon back in the day, when they had Mariota, they had all those guys, and they had something that worked. And, they just continued to use it, and teams couldn't beat it. And I think UCF has found that to where they know who to recruit to fit their system. And that's where they're at right now. And until someone can figure out how to beat it, then they're just going to continue to just destroy teams. But I want to ask you one more quick question before we probably let you go. Which out of I know you probably don't like this, the big 3, quote unquote big 3, Florida, Florida State, and Miami, think has the brightest future? in your mind?
Ooh, so that's tough. I think it's like let's discount Florida State. They're a complete disaster right now, and it's obviously not them. So of the big four, sorry, just had to. If you're talking about which two besides UCF,
yeah. So Florida and Miami, pretty much.
Right. So it's hard. It's hard because while I will discount a lot about what Florida is right now, and I think they're very highly ranked for the way that they've performed, and for that matter, what their upside is. They have a really rough stretch coming up, and I don't think they're going to win any of those tough games that they play coming up. And I'll give them credit, man. If you had to go play like it's Auburn, Georgia, and LSU, and
it's ridiculous.
That's rough. No one's surviving that well, right? For that matter, if you flipped Florida with LSU and put, you know what I mean, and had them all when they all play each other, it's cannibalism. The SEC is in another world, right?
And I actually tweeted it. Sorry to cut you off. I actually tweeted it the other day that it wouldn't surprise me because not being just a homer, but just in general, like what you talked about, the schedule of Florida and everything.
Mm-hmm.
It wouldn't surprise me with Miami being a young team. I think they're going to improve immensely throughout the year. I've liked what I've seen from Darren Williams. It wouldn't surprise me if Miami ends up having more wins than Florida at the end of the year.
Yeah.
Just because Miami's schedule, they can still win 9 games.
It's light. Right. Well, that's what I was about to say is the reason that I think Miami, and this is going to please your fan base here. The reason Miami may have the brighter future is because it's not like they've missed out on recruiting. And I think Jeremy Williams is a really good quarterback. I think, do I think he's an absolute surefire superstar? That I'm not sure of, but I think he's the best quarterback they've had in a decade. And I think that having a really solid quarterback, when you do recruit the way that you do, and you have a defensive-minded head coach, so you know that your defense is always going to recruit well, you're in the ACC. I mean, let's be blatantly honest. It's Clemson and then a bunch of average teams after that, for the most part. I mean, there's nobody that's on this other stratosphere. And it's like it's Clemson, it's a league, and then it's everybody else, right? So if you're Miami, who's on the other side, with Jeremy Williams, you should be perennially, and maybe not this season. Maybe Virginia's still better than you this season, right? And that's okay. And who knows? Maybe Miami goes and beats Virginia and finds their way to an ACC, coastal championship. But I think the reason you can feel confident that Miami might have more success in the immediate future in terms of getting to and maybe even stealing a conference championship is who knows what happens when Trevor Lawrence leaves a couple of years from now. I mean, they bring in superstars, right, at Clemson constantly, but you never know. We've seen multiple 5-star recruits not pan out all over the place, including Miami and Florida at the quarterback position and elsewhere. But when you got Jeremy Williams and you're in an ACC Coastal that's pretty average, there's a lot more upside that's there. The one thing I will say is Dan Mullen is a more proven coach than Manny Diaz. That's not to say Manny Diaz won't be a great coach, because I think he could be. I love listening to Manny Diaz speak. It's literally part of my job. And the guy fires me up, and I'm not even really a Canes fan. But I think that I do trust Dan Mullen a little bit more, but I think the upside is there for the Canes. So if you gun to my head, I would say the Canes have more success in the upcoming future than the Gators do.
Well, I think that, aside from the schedule, which you touched on, I think it's more so what will Florida do, because Miami is just a giant question mark right now, right? So, you've got to see, okay, two things as far as Miami. Manny Diaz is loyal. Well, we're not going to say loyal. He fired people that he was friends with, but that he is friends and he's close with a lot of his defensive staff, starting with his defensive coordinator, which he brought in. Will he, even though he's been known to get rid of people who underperform, if Blake Baker doesn't work out, will he get rid of him? Or will he stick with him? And is right now just a fluke because they're young, which we would probably all agree yes. But if some of these crazy calls like you saw in North Carolina continue, will that hurt them down the road in recruiting? That's a question mark. How long will Dan Eno stay? That's a question mark. How well will, Diaz keep his composure? When people are kind of talking about him and maybe being a little down on him, that's all got question marks. So really, I think that this lies in Florida's hands, and where I think outside of the scheduling makes a difference, I think with Dan Mullen it's not what he does on the field, because he's known to win games on the field. And even though I think he's a coach that his philosophy is more of, I want to outlast you, and I don't think that's a huge recipe for success. I think, even though I think that that's kind of his recipe because of the talent he has, so it's not really a knock on him. I think it's what he does off the field, and so far he's completely failing off the field. With the transfers, with the people, getting arrested, with suspensions, with injuries, with leaving. I mean, just down the list, he has been Urban Meyer 2.0, and he's done it early. Whereas Urban kind of gets caught up when he leaves. His stuff's already catching up to him where he's at currently. So I think, but if he doesn't navigate in these next 2 years off the field recruiting and everything like that, in order to win and navigate on the field, if he doesn't do it soon, it's just 2 more years of getting beat by Georgia before fans begin to boo. It's just, maybe Kentucky stays good, you lose to them next year, then really they're down on you. I mean, it's little things like that, because your schedule does you no favors. And I think it's premature for people to want to get rid of Dan Mullen at any point, because I agree with you, he's an excellent coach. But I think it's what he does off the field, and so far he's done a terrible job, and that could ultimately be what hurts him, whereas Diaz, from the get-go, with his defense and then even now as a head coach, has done a pretty good job off the field.
Urban just had the shield of Tebow. That stuff was happening early with him as well. He just had the shield of the perfect do-gooder in Tebow to kind of shield all the stuff that was going on off the field. But I totally agree with you there, 100%.
Awesome.
Yeah, Jeremy. So Jeremy, thank you for joining us, man. We appreciate it. It's good to have an insight from a UCF alum, someone that loves UCF so much. Everyone, go follow him. Again, tell everyone your Twitter handle so that way you can go follow him.
I got one more question.
Oh, yeah, go for it.
What do you think the future is for UCF?
I think UCF is Boise State at this point, right? I mean, I think it was about staying power. And I think this year, hopefully, I'm going to be blatantly frank about this. I'm petrified of this Pitt game. It sets up perfectly for a letdown. Finally, all of the national media has swelled around. UCF is underrated. They're underranked. Dylan Gabriel's feeling himself. You pounded Stanford, and now you're going into Pitt, who just wants – that team plays dirty. I mean, you guys know. That's a physical, grinded out, and we beat them down last year, embarrassed them. And now we're going into their place after feeling ourselves a little bit. It sets up for a letdown. So we can be saying all this, and the loss could change everything. But I think UCF's staying power, especially if they do go another undefeated season here, has shown like this isn't a fluke. And so I don't know where conference expansion is going to go. And I'm not sure that the AAC is really, truly going to get the quote-unquote Power 6 respect that, they're looking for. Although, if you do look at SP Plus from Bill Connolly, who I think is fantastic, the gap, if you take away if you take away Clemson, UCF, and I believe it was Oregon in the Pac-12, if you look at the rest of the teams, like you take away the best, the AAC, the Pac-12, and the ACC are nearly identical. The AAC is not that far off from being the ACC or the Pac-12. It's not the same, but it's not that far off if you look at those middle tier teams. But nonetheless, if UCF stays in the AAC, I think it's just going to be any year they go undefeated, it'll be a near six bowl, and maybe if this continues in this way, eventually they may get their playoff shot. I think that could or should be this year. I think I can make the argument that it's funny without Mackenzie Milton, but that this is the best UCF team that has existed top to bottom. And so it'll be interesting to see the way it goes. But I think if as long as Heupel sticks around for another year or two, that this level of success is going to be pretty consistent. That like similar to Boise, down years will be things like 9-3 and 10-2.
Well, I think that ultimately UCF's goal is to play for a national championship. Mm-hmm. And I think that if you continue to beat people in Power 5 when you are not Power 5, they're not going to schedule you. And you know what I mean? So when you're going to have to, and that's not your fault, but you're not going to ever make the playoffs by beating the Pitts and the Stanfords and then going down. So the future at some point has got to be expansion, joining a conference, a Power 5 conference But as far as what you're saying about the ACC Pac-12, I agree with you, and that's what's sad. I think if you look at the Power Five as a whole, the ACC's trending down. Well, I think the ACC is about to level out, but the last 2 years, the ACC I think hit its peak and then immediately trended down. The Pac-12 is almost leveling out, but they've been trending down. The SEC has leveled out. I don't think they're as good as they were back in like 08, 09, 2010.
Yeah, well, their top 5 or 6 are as good as they've ever been, but the bottom half is not.
Yeah, exactly. And then you got the Big Ten. I think has slowly been trending up, and then I think the then the Big 12 I think has continuously been going downhill. So it's a good time for UCF to pick a conference. I just don't want to see them do what Boise does and be right where they're at. I hope somebody picks them up.
I also think that the best thing that could happen for all of college football, to be quite frank, is to expand to 8. Every Power 5 champion, 1 group of 5 representative, and 2 at-large every single year. And
I agree.
That would be the best way to go for everybody. But until that day, we'll be sitting here planning our undefeated national championship parade.
I agree. Well, listen, man, it was fun talking to you. Definitely enjoyed it. Hopefully eventually get you back on the show, man. It was a good time.
No, this was an absolute blast. Thank you guys for having me.
Thanks, Jeremy. I appreciate it.
All right, man. You have a good night.
All right, guys. Thank you so much. All right. Bye-bye.
Awesome. Well,
nice little perspective.
I think we have went a long way, guys. We dabbled a little bit on Miami. Didn't go quite as in depth because we knew we had this interview coming up. We hope you enjoyed it. Like I said, we're going to try to banter off into some college ball here and there, not just be 100% Miami, maybe 80, 90%. But I hope you enjoyed the conversation. Let us know your thoughts and opinions on Twitter, and hope you enjoyed the show. And we will be talking to you guys next week.